Hello and welcome to Firstpost Live, where we bring you the day's top 4 stories from across the world. I am Joshua Barnes, live from the Firstpost studios. Let's begin with the headlines. Donald Trump signs legislation ending the longest government shutdown in US history, restoring pay for federal workers and reviving critical services after weeks of political deadlock. China slams Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi over her comments on Taiwan, demanding she retract them while warning that Tokyo will bear all consequences. Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani declares victory after preliminary results show his coalition leading decisively in the general election, setting him up for a possible second term. A new report warns that global fossil fuel emissions are on track to hit a record high in 2025, pushing the planet further from the Paris climate targets. And South Korea comes to a standstill with flights halted, stock market trading delayed, and parents praying as thousands of students take the make or break college entrance exam known locally as Sunung. Shifting focus first to Bangladesh. The diplomatic and political storm surrounding Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is growing sharper, just before a landmark verdict in her trial for crimes against humanity. Bangladesh on Wednesday summoned the Indian Deputy High Commissioner to lodge a formal protest, accusing New Delhi of facilitating deposed PM Sheikh Hasina's access to media. The Indian envoy was asked to ensure Hasina no longer gets media access from Indian soil. The development came shortly after Sheikh Hasina gave an interview that has already sent shockwaves through Dhaka's political establishment. Speaking from an undisclosed location within India with CNN News 18, Hasina launched a blistering attack on the country's current interim government, led by Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus. Hasina accused Yunus of placing radical extremists in his cabinet, dismantling Bangladesh's constitution, and standing silent while minorities were oppressed.
Yunus, an unelected head of state who has placed radical extremists in his cabinet, dismantled Bangladesh's constitution, and stood silent while minorities have been oppressed. The only way to restore good health to Bangladesh's political system is by enabling a government to be elected and genuinely rule by the consent of the people. That is the best way to future-proof our country against regime degradation.
Meanwhile, Bangladesh's chief prosecutor confirmed that a tribunal will pronounce its verdict on November the 17th, marking the final phase of a months-long trial that has divided the nation. The 78-year-old Hasina, tried in absentia, faces 5 major charges, including failure to prevent murder and crimes against humanity, linked to a crackdown on student protests that led to her ouster last year. Prosecutors have sought the death penalty if she is found guilty. Hasina has dismissed the proceedings, saying she is the victim of a political vendetta. Dhaka has seen a surge in violence in recent weeks, with crude petrol bombs hurled at government buildings. At least one person was burned to death this week when a parked bus was set on fire. Earlier today, authorities deployed armoured vehicles and checkpoints around the court complex, while the outlawed Awami League, Hasina's party, called for a nationwide lockdown. With tensions high, crude bombs going off in Dhaka, and the verdict just days away, Bangladesh stands on edge. Shifting focus now to Pakistan. The country's lower house of parliament has approved a sweeping constitutional amendment giving Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir lifetime legal immunity. Pakistan's National Assembly passed the changes on November the 12th with the required 2/3 majority. The passage of the proposed law came amid a chaotic session that saw opposition lawmakers tearing up copies of the bill. The legislation, known as the 27th Constitutional Amendment Bill, was rushed through Parliament at unprecedented speed. The Senate, or the upper house of Parliament, approved it on November the 10th. The lower house voted on November the 12th, and the bill now returns to the upper house for procedural clearance, before going to President Zardari for his signature. The amendment gives Asim Munir a new title, Chief of the Defence Forces, or CDF, putting the Air Force and Navy under his formal command. Alongside the Army, the bill also shields Munir and other five-star military officers from future prosecution, even after they retire. The constitutional changes go far beyond the military chain of command. They also strip the Supreme Court of its role in interpreting the Constitution, handing that power to a newly created Federal Constitutional Court.
आज अगर उसको कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का उसमें उसको हिस्सा बना रहे हैं तो खाली वो फील्ड मार्शल सईद आसिम मुनीर नहीं, उसमें चीफ ऑफ द एयर स्टाफ का भी उसमें मार्शल ऑफ द एयर फोर्स का जिक्र होगा, उसमें चीफ ऑफ द नेवल स्टाफ एडमिरल ऑफ द फ्लीट का उनका जिक्र होगा। इसमें क्या बुरी बात है जनाब स्पीकर? इसमें क्या बुरी बात है? कौमें जो हैं अपने हीरोज की इज्जत करती हैं।
Former Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan's party has slammed the amendment as a step towards sinking the ship of democracy and judicial independence. One PTI leader said the amendment turned Pakistan into an authoritarian state through the facade of constitutional order. Critics say the amendment is an attempt to weaken judicial independence and eliminates one of the last checks on the executive and military establishment. Observers add that the new amendment formalises Pakistan's military dominance over civilian institutions. The legislation, they say, codifies what has long been an open secret, that the army is the real power in Pakistan's politics. The amendment now awaits the president's formal assent, but for many Pakistanis, the political message is already clear. Asim Munir's hold on Pakistan has never been stronger, and the future of its fragile democracy has never looked more uncertain in recent decades. Moving on, a major graft probe into Ukraine's energy procurement has shaken Kyiv. 2 cabinet ministers were pushed out as investigators released audio and cash evidence. Ukraine has been hit by a large corruption scandal after anti-corruption agencies said they uncovered an alleged $100 million embezzlement scheme in the energy sector. The National Anti-Corruption Bureau, or NABU, and the Specialised Anti-Corruption Prosecutors Office, or SAP, made this announcement. They said the 15-month probe, based on about 1,000 hours of recordings, implicated people close to President Volodymyr Zelensky. Following the releases, President Volodymyr Zelensky called for the removal of the Energy and Justice Ministers, and the Prime Minister asked Parliament to dismiss them. Investigators said the scheme involved a secret or illegal payment made by contractors working for Energoatom, Ukraine's national nuclear operator, with alleged commissions of roughly 10 to 15% of contract values. On Monday, NABU published photographs of bags of cash and said proceeds were laundered through an office in Kyiv and moved outside of Ukraine, including transfers linked to Russia, according to the agency. And on Tuesday, the agencies reported that the following individuals were involved. Among those named were former Deputy Prime Minister Alexei Chernyshov and a businessman, Timur Mindich, also a co-owner of President Zelensky's former TV studio, Kvartal 95. The businessman has reported to left the country. Prosecutors said some suspects were detained while others remained at large. And on Wednesday, 2 cabinet ministers were pushed out in the fallout. The Energy Minister, Svetlana Grinchuk, said she had submitted her resignation and denied any wrongdoing, while Justice Minister Herman Halushenko said he would defend himself against the accusations. And a former advisor to the Justice Minister has also been named by investigators. President Zelensky publicly said the Justice and Energy Ministers had to go.
Any effective action against corruption is very necessary. The inevitability of punishment is necessary. Energoatom provides Ukraine with the largest share of energy generation. Now cleanliness in the company is a priority. In energy, in every industry, everyone who built the schemes must receive a clear procedural answer. There must be sentences.
He stressed the need for the inevitability of punishment and said Energoatom's integrity was a priority because the company provides a large share of Ukraine's power. Listen in.
Any effective action against corruption is very necessary. The inevitability of punishment is necessary. Energoatom provides Ukraine with the largest share of energy generation. Now cleanliness in the company is a priority. In energy, in every industry, everyone who built the schemes must receive a clear procedural answer. There must be sentences.
Shortly after his remarks, the government moved to remove several Energoatom officials, including a vice president and senior procurement of finance officers, as the probes continue to widen. Meanwhile, ordinary Ukrainians voiced frustration and worry about reputation and public services.
In my opinion, such scandals, first of all, spoil the country's reputation at the international level, which is extremely important for us now. And as for the mood of citizens, the moods here are different. Everyone's opinions are different. Of course, we are holding on, but of course it is clear that this is very, very unpleasant.
And the scandal comes as Russian strikes continue to damage Ukraine's energy infrastructure. And this new controversy adds fresh strain to an already punished power system. Earlier this year, Zelensky briefly attempted to curb the powers of the NABU and SAP, but mass protests and pressure from European partners forced him to reverse course and fully restore the agencies. Analysts say the latest allegations could raise new questions about Ukraine's commitment to anti-corruption reforms, with possible political and diplomatic fallout. With war, energy shortages and damaged infrastructure already weighing heavily in the country, this corruption scandal adds a new challenge for Kyiv and a wartime president. Anti-corruption agencies say they will continue releasing material from the probe. Prosecutors have detained several suspects and say more names and evidence are expected as the investigation moves forward. And moving on to a story that has once again dragged a powerful name back into the orbit of one of America's darkest scandals. Newly released emails suggest that President Donald Trump may have known more about the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein's activities than previously admitted. These documents, made public by the House Oversight Committee on Wednesday, contain shocking exchanges between Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and others, painting a troubling picture of what may have happened behind closed doors. Among the most striking revelations is an email Epstein sent to his co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell, back in 2011, where he wrote, and I quote, "I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump." Epstein went on to say that one of the young women, later identified by Democrats as a victim, spent hours at his house with Donald Trump. In her reply, Maxwell said that she had been thinking about that as well. The emails also reveal that in 2015, when Trump was seeking the Republican nomination for the White House, journalist Michael Wolff wrote to Epstein,
"I hear CNN is planning to ask Trump tonight about his relationship with you, either on air or in scrum afterwards."
If we were able to craft an answer for him, what do you think it should be?
"I think you should let him hang himself. If he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the House, then that gives you a valuable PR and political currency."
Years later, in 2019, Epstein reportedly wrote to Wolff saying that Trump had asked him to resign from Mar-a-Lago, although, according to Epstein, he was never a member of the president's exclusive club in Florida. In the same email, Epstein added that of course Trump knew about the girls, and even claimed that Trump had once asked Maxwell to stop. But the emails go beyond accusations. They show that Epstein's inner circle continued tracking Trump's movements long after their friendship reportedly ended. In one message from November 2016, Epstein's pilot informed him that Trump was scheduled to depart on a certain flight. The files also show Epstein's associates regularly forwarding news stories about Trump, suggesting the disgraced financier kept a close eye on his one-time friend. In fact, Epstein even mocked Trump in a message to former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, calling him borderline insane. The reaction to these revelations has been swift and polarized. Democrats say the emails deepen the questions surrounding Trump's past association with Epstein and have demanded the release of the full Epstein files, believed to contain years of travel records and correspondence. Republicans, meanwhile, are pushing back hard. They accuse Democrats of cherry-picking a handful of messages from over 23,000 documents to create what they call a clickbait scandal. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt also defended President Trump.
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong. And what President Trump has always said is that he was from Palm Beach, and so was Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a member at Mar-a-Lago until President Trump kicked him out because Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile and he was a creep.
And this comes as President Trump has himself denied that he knew about Epstein's sexual abuse of underage girls and women. After these recent emails were made public, President Trump fired back on his Truth Social platform, accusing Democrats of trying to revive the Jeffrey Epstein hoax to distract from their failures on the government shutdown. The newly released emails have opened another chapter in the long and tangled history between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. What happens next will depend on whether the full set of Epstein documents is made public and what those records ultimately reveal. That is all we have on the show today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Until then, thank you for watching.